Dale walked into the quiet house, a small box from the jeweler clutched in his hand. He'd planned to surprise Brenda. Instead, he heard her voice from the den, low and conspiratorial. "He's at work, still oblivious." The words cut the air, a cold, visible crack in the foundation of their life, leaving him exposed in his own living room. Her brittle laugh followed. "Don't worry, he never suspects a thing." Dale, 38, reflects on his 11-year relationship with Brenda, 36, including 8 years of marriage. Their early romance was built on mutual ambition and shared dreams, culminating in a Cape Cod proposal. The couple faced a prolonged and agonizing struggle with infertility, enduring numerous failed treatments. Brenda's emotional state deteriorated, marked by snapping and withdrawal, especially after Mindy's pregnancy. A house renovation offered temporary solace, as Brenda envisioned a kid's kitchen. Brenda decided to halt fertility treatments, feeling like a failure despite Dale's quiet attempts at reassurance. Their intimacy waned, sex becoming mechanical before ceasing altogether, as both focused on work. Dale convinced himself their marital distance was a temporary phase, a normal adjustment. Brenda developed an intense preoccupation with her phone, taking it everywhere and using new passcodes. Dale's first true suspicion arose when her phone constantly lit up during a quiet movie night. He attempted her old phone passcodes after she showered, finding none worked, stirring a mix of relief and deeper worry. Coming home early with lilies, Dale overheard Brenda on the deck. "I miss you too, and no, he doesn't suspect anything." Brenda abruptly ended the call, attributing it to the Hendersons. That night, Brenda initiated unusually passionate and desperate sex, leaving Dale to question her motives. Dale later drove by the Hendersons' Colonial, noticing a sold sign posted 3 weeks prior. "I was 38 then, a pharmaceutical sales rep, my life a series of calls and quarterly targets. Brenda was 36, a sharp real estate agent, always closing another deal. We'd been together for 11 years, married for 8. Our story had started, like many others, with promise and a shared sense of purpose. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue, two ambitious people in their late 20s, talking about career paths and future plans. We built a life, brick by brick, from that first shared dream of a suburban house with a 2-car garage. I proposed on Cape Cod, the salty air thick with possibilities, a diamond glinting against the ocean gray. She said yes without hesitation, her eyes reflecting the same bright future I saw. The first few years were good. We worked hard, played hard, saved hard. Then came the wanting, a quiet ache that grew louder with each passing year. We tried for children. We tried for a long time. The doctor's office became a second home, a place of sterile white walls and hushed conversations about ovulation cycles, sperm counts, and progesterone levels. There were rounds of IUIs, then the more invasive, more expensive IVF. Each failed attempt chipped away at us, leaving behind a silence that was harder to fill. Brenda started to change. The easy smile began to tighten at the corners. She snapped more often, small, sharp words that stung. She retreated into herself, a quiet withdrawal that made the house feel larger. I remember Mindy, my cousin, announcing her pregnancy at Thanksgiving. Brenda had stared at her swollen belly, then at me, her voice low and brittle. "It's not my body failing you, Dale." The words hung between us, a raw wound. We bought a bigger house then, a colonial with good bones and a generous backyard. The renovation became a project, a temporary distraction, a way to focus our energy elsewhere. Brenda talked about a kid's kitchen, an open space where little ones could run free. I saw the hope in her eyes, a fragile light I desperately wanted to protect. But even the fresh paint and new countertops couldn't fill the void. One evening, after another call from the clinic, she simply said, "I can't do it anymore, Dale. I just feel like such a failure." I held her, stroking her hair, telling her she wasn't, that we'd be fine, that there were other ways. The words felt hollow, even to me. After that, the physical intimacy faded. Sex became a scheduled event, then a mechanical act, then nothing at all. The bed felt vast and empty. We both threw ourselves into our work, Brenda selling more houses, me exceeding my sales quotas. The house, once a symbol of our shared future, became a place where two people lived separate lives under the same roof. I told myself it was normal, a phase that all couples went through stretches like this. We'd find our way back. We had to. Then Brenda's phone started. It was always with her, a constant companion. It went to the bathroom, to the kitchen, to the backyard when she gardened. She changed her passcodes multiple times, each new one a small, invisible barrier between us. If my gaze lingered on it for a second too long, she'd snap. "What are you looking at, Dale?" One Tuesday night, we were watching a movie, the kind that required little attention, a soft hum of background noise. Brenda sat beside me, but her focus was elsewhere. Her phone, clutched in her hand, pulsed with incoming messages every few minutes, its screen a silent, insistent beacon. A cold trickle of suspicion, thin and unsettling, ran down my spine. Later, when she went to shower, I picked up her phone. I tried her birthday, my birthday, our anniversary. None of them worked. A part of me felt a twisted relief. Maybe it was nothing, maybe just a new habit, but a deeper, colder part knew better. 2 days later, I came home early, a bunch of white lilies in hand. It was an impulse, a small gesture to try and bridge the growing chasm. As I stepped onto the deck, I heard her voice, low and intimate. "I miss you too," she murmured. My hand froze on the doorknob. "No, he doesn't suspect anything," she continued, a faint laugh in her voice. "Soon." The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. She ended the call abruptly as I walked into view, her face a mask of practiced surprise. "Oh, Dale, you're home early." She smiled, too wide. That was just Janice Henderson about the closing on their colonial. Later that night, she initiated sex, her touch almost desperate, her body pressing into mine with an urgency I hadn't felt in years. I wondered if it was guilt, a silent offering in the dark. The next morning, on my way to a client call, I drove past the Hendersons' house on Maple Street. It was a handsome colonial, just as Brenda had described. But in the front yard, a bright red sold sign stood proudly. Below it, a smaller rider, barely visible, stated, "Closed 3 weeks ago." Dale confronts Brenda about the Maple Street property, which she deflects with a detailed, quick lie. His gut instinct warns him, yet he pretends to accept her explanation, beginning a subtle observation of her. He notices distinct changes. A new perfume, carefully chosen outfits for client meetings, and the faint scent of foreign cologne. Brenda's schedule becomes increasingly irregular, with frequent late nights and vague excuses. Dale starts tracking her car's odometer, documenting the readings before her departures. He finds discrepancies between the mileage and her stated destinations for long drives. A planned conference call for Dale ends with him dining alone after Brenda texts about being stuck in negotiations. Dale attempts to reconnect, suggesting a weekend getaway or date night, but Brenda declines, citing work pressure. Using a Find My Phone app on his old iPad, linked to their shared iCloud, Dale monitors her location. Brenda's phone often pings from Starbucks or client offices, but sometimes from an unexpected residential area. He discerns a pattern, a specific suburb distant from her current real estate listings. Dale experiences an internal conflict, torn between wanting to trust his wife and the mounting evidence. He recalls Wayne Miller, a casual acquaintance, and a vague sense of unease begins to settle over him. Dale researches Wayne, confirming his address is in the same suburb Brenda's phone occasionally registers. A heavy, cold, sinking feeling fills Dale's chest as the pieces begin to connect. He plans a 3-day business trip out of town, informing Brenda of his departure. That evening, I waited for the right moment. Brenda was at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone, a glass of wine beside her. "About the Hendersons," I began, trying to keep my voice even. "I drove past their place today, saw the sold sign." She didn't look up immediately. "Oh, right. Janice told me it went through faster than expected. Good for them." "No," I said, my voice a little tighter than I'd intended. "The sign said it closed 3 weeks ago, before you supposedly talked to Janice yesterday." Brenda put her phone down, her gaze meeting mine. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, quickly masked. "Dale, you know how it is. Sometimes I have to keep up appearances. Janice is a client, a friend even. She introduced me to a new couple, the Petersons, who are looking for something similar in that area." I was doing a walkthrough with them at a property on Pine Ridge, not far from the Hendersons, and Janice called me about some details for a future referral. I just told you it was the Hendersons to keep it simple. She smiled, a practiced, confident smile. It was just easier than explaining all the ins and outs of client prospecting. Well, her explanation was quick, detailed, almost too perfect. My gut churned, a cold, sour feeling, but I nodded, pretending to accept it, pretending to believe her. From that moment, I started watching her. Not overtly, not in a way that would tip her off, but subtly. I noted the small changes. There was a new perfume, a floral scent I didn't recognize, more expensive than her usual. Her outfits for late client meetings became meticulously chosen, dresses she usually saved for special occasions. And sometimes when she came home late, there was a faint, almost imperceptible scent clinging to her clothes, a cologne that wasn't mine. Her schedule grew erratic. Late nights became more frequent, often with vague excuses about clients needing to sign papers after work, or showing houses late because that's when people were free. "The market's just crazy right now, Dale," she'd say, shrugging off my quiet queries. I started checking her car's odometer. Before she left in the mornings, I'd take a quick picture of the dashboard with my phone. When she returned, I'd check it again. The numbers didn't always add up. A long drive to show a house in Canton, 25 miles away, sometimes only accounted for 10 miles on the odometer. Or a short trip to the grocery store would log twice the actual distance. The inconsistencies were small, almost negligible, but they added up like grains of sand building a dune. One evening, I had a scheduled conference call with my district manager, which meant I'd be tied up until late. Brenda said she had to show a house in the next town. I finished my call, opened a beer, and realized I was sitting alone at the kitchen table. Her text arrived an hour later. "Stuck in negotiations, won't be back until late." I ate a frozen dinner, the silence in the house heavy and cold. I tried to reconnect, to pull us back to what we once were. "How about a weekend getaway, Bren? Just us. Maybe up to the lake," I suggested one Saturday morning. "Or a simple date night, that new Italian place downtown." She shook her head, not even looking up from her laptop. "Dale, I can't. You know how crazy things are. This market, I can't afford to take my foot off the gas. Maybe next month." Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I remembered my old iPad, gathering dust in the back of a drawer. It was linked to our shared iCloud account. I dug it out, powered it up, and opened the Find My Phone app. It was easy, almost too easy. Her phone was often at a Starbucks or a client office or a listed property, but sometimes it pinged from an unexpected residential area. I started noticing a pattern, a particular suburb, about 30 minutes from our house, not close to any of her current listings. It was a quieter area, older homes, mature trees. The desire to believe my wife warred with the growing mountain of evidence. My mind tried to invent logical explanations, to rationalize the inconsistencies, but the truth, cold and hard, was beginning to surface. Then a name floated into my mind, Wayne Miller, a guy I'd occasionally seen at the neighborhood bar, a quiet man I'd talked beer and lawn care with, even helped him move a sofa once when he was setting up his new place after his divorce. A vague unease settled over me. He lived in that same quiet suburb, I dimly recalled. I looked him up, an address search on my work laptop late at night, the screen casting an eerie glow. There it was, 147 Sycamore Lane, Westwood. Westwood, the suburb Brenda's phone had occasionally pinged from. A sinking feeling, heavy and cold, filled my chest, like a block of ice settling there. That night, I told Brenda I had to go out of town for a business trip. 3 days, I said. Starts Friday morning. Back Sunday evening. She just nodded, her eyes still on her phone. Dale packs a small bag, informing Brenda he's leaving early for a conference in Ohio, his heart heavy. Instead of driving to Ohio, he checks into a cheap motel a few towns away, concealing his truck. He endures 2 days of torment, reliving memories and doubting every aspect of his relationship. He observes his house in the evenings, seeing Brenda's car, a semblance of normalcy he clings to. By the third day, the agony of uncertainty becomes unbearable. He decides he cannot wait any longer. He drives home in the late afternoon, parking several streets away, and walks the rest of the distance. Finding the front door unlocked, his heart pounds as he steps into the silent, heavy air of the house. Muffled sounds from upstairs, more than just voices, heighten his dread. He creeps up the creaking stairs, each step a testament to the unfolding betrayal. Through the slightly ajar bedroom door, he sees Brenda with Wayne Miller. The sight is raw and gut-wrenching, his wife intimately entangled with another man. Dale freezes, his world shattering into disjointed images and sounds. He watches, transfixed, for an eternity, the details searing themselves into his memory. Numb with a screaming mind, he slowly and quietly backs away from the door. He slips out of the house, gets back into his truck, and drives aimlessly, the image branded onto his mind. From a roadside diner, his voice ragged, he calls his best friend, Frank, barely able to speak. I packed a small overnight bag, just a few clothes, a toothbrush. Friday morning, before the sun was fully up, I told Brenda I was heading out. Conference starts early in Ohio, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I leaned down, kissed the top of her head. Her hair smelled of her new perfume. My heart felt like a stone in my chest. See you Sunday night. Instead of turning west toward the interstate, I drove east, a few towns over. I found a cheap motel, one of those places with external corridors and flickering neon signs. I parked my truck behind a laundromat, mostly out of sight, and checked in under a false name. The room smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and desperation. I spent the next 2 days in that room, the air conditioning rattling, my mind in a constant loop. I replayed everything: our first date, the Cape Cod proposal, the infertility struggles, her brittle comment about Mindy's pregnancy, the kids' kitchen plans, the new perfume, the phone, the lying about the Hendersons. Every memory was suddenly tainted, viewed through a new, darker lens. Had it always been there? Had I just been too blind, too willing to believe? The agony was a dull throb behind my eyes, constant and unrelenting. In the evenings, I drove past our house, parking a street over, just close enough to see. Brenda's car was there, usually. The lights were on. Everything looked normal, perfectly normal, from the outside. I hoped desperately that it was. By Sunday afternoon, the quiet torture was worse than any truth could be. I couldn't stand it anymore. My stomach was a knot of anxiety. My hands trembled. I checked out of the motel, my face probably looking as haggard as I felt, and started driving home. It was late afternoon, the sun slanting low through the trees. I parked my truck 4 blocks away on a quiet residential street and walked the rest of the way. The air was still and warm, the suburban quiet a sharp contrast to the storm brewing inside me. My footsteps felt heavy on the pavement. As I approached our house, a knot tightened in my gut. The front door was slightly ajar, unlocked. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum. I pushed it open slowly, quietly, and stepped inside. The air was still, heavy, almost expectant. Then I heard it, muffled sounds from upstairs, not just voices, something else. A rhythmic creaking, a low groan, my breath caught in my throat. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, my legs suddenly heavy, concrete. I forced myself to move. Each step up the carpeted stairs was a creak, a tiny betrayal of my presence. The sounds grew clearer, undeniable. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the hallway. I crept closer, my hand reaching for the doorknob, then pulling back. My eye found the crack. Through the narrow opening, I saw her. Brenda, she was on our bed, and she wasn't alone. Wayne Miller, the raw, gut-wrenching sight. My wife, the woman I had built a life with, the woman who had shared my dreams, my failures, my most intimate moments, was writhing with pleasure with another man. Her head was thrown back, her hair fanned out on our pillows, the pillows where my head rested every night. His hand was tangled in her hair, his back to me bare. My world collapsed. It wasn't a sudden explosion, but a slow, agonizing implosion. A silent shattering of every belief, every hope, every shared memory. I was frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. The details were seared into my mind. The pale skin of her shoulder, the curve of her back, the way her fingers clutched at his arm. I watched for what felt like an eternity, though it could have only been seconds. Every second was a hammer blow. Then Then slowly, mechanically, I backed away, quietly. My body was numb, disconnected, but my mind was screaming, a high-pitched, silent shriek. I turned, descended the stairs, one slow, careful step at a time, each movement an act of pure will. I slipped out of the house, pulling the door shut with a soft click, and started walking back to my truck. The image was burned behind my eyes, an ugly, permanent brand. I got in, started the engine, and drove aimlessly, no destination in mind, just away. Away from the house, away from the image, away from the shattered pieces of my life. I found a roadside diner, one of those places with chrome stools and greasy food. I ordered a black coffee, though my stomach rebelled. My hands were shaking too hard to hold the cup steady. I pulled out my phone and called Frank. He was my best friend, had been since high school. My voice was ragged, barely a whisper. "Frank," I choked out, I, I need you." Dale drives for hours to Frank's place, the blurred landscape matching his internal emptiness. Upon arrival, Frank instantly recognizes Dale's distress, offering a beer without needing an explanation. Dale recounts the entire story, from Brenda's phone obsession to the bedroom betrayal, in a flat, numb tone. Frank listens, providing quiet support, his anger at Wayne Miller subtly evident. Dale decides to confront Brenda, but knows he needs a strategic plan, not an emotional outburst. He stays with Frank for 2 days, sleeping little, trying to comprehend the depth of the betrayal. He calls Brenda, maintaining the pretense of his trip, and notes her cheerful, untroubled voice, which feels like a physical blow. Returning home, he feigns normalcy, receiving a hug and kiss from Brenda that feels like ash. Dinner is quiet. Brenda talks about her day, while Dale watches her, finding no guilt, only practiced composure. Later in bed, Brenda attempts intimacy, but Dale recoils, using exhaustion from the drive as an excuse. The next morning, Dale calmly asks Brenda to sit down, his steady voice unnerving. He meticulously presents the evidence: the Maple Street lie, phone pings, overheard conversation, and Wayne Miller's address. Brenda's face pales as she attempts hollow denials and explanations. Dale interrupts her, his voice breaking. "I saw you, Brenda, in our bed, with Wayne." But Brenda collapses into tears, a flood of apologies, pleas, and explanations. "It meant nothing, Dale. It was a mistake." I drove to Frank's place, 2 states over, hours blurring into the rearview mirror. The sun dipped, then rose again, painting the sky in colors I couldn't appreciate. My truck ate up the miles, a mechanical beast carrying my broken self. I arrived late, sometime past midnight. The world outside, Frank's porch light, quiet and dark. I felt empty, hollowed out, exhausted in a way sleep wouldn't fix. Frank opened the door, his face creased with concern. He just looked at me, didn't ask a single question. He'd known me since high school, knew the way my shoulders slumped, the flatness in my eyes. He just handed me a cold beer, then sat down on the worn leather couch, waiting. I started talking, my voice a dull monotone, as if recounting someone else's story. I told him everything, from Brenda's phone obsession to the Maple Street lie, the odometer readings, the find my phone pings, the overheard call, then finally the scene in my own bedroom, the image seared into my brain. I didn't spare any detail, each word a shard of glass in my throat. Frank listened, his gaze steady, occasionally nodding. He didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix it. When I finished, the silence in his living room was heavy. "He's a piece of work, that Wayne, huh? Oh," Frank said finally, his voice low, anger simmering beneath the calm surface. "Going after a married woman. A friend of yours, no less." I knew I needed to confront Brenda. The thought of it made my stomach clench, but it had to be done. Not immediately, though. Not with the rage still bubbling, the raw pain still throbbing. I needed a plan, a clear head, not just blind fury. I stayed at Frank's for 2 more days, sleeping little, trying to process the enormity of the betrayal. My mind raced, trying to find a pattern, a reason, some explanation for why our 11 years had dissolved into this. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus. The world felt out of sync. On Tuesday morning, I called Brenda. Hey, I said, forcing a casual tone. Just checking in. How's your week going? I pretended I was still on my trip. Her voice was cheerful, untroubled, bubbling with mundane details about clients and house showings. The lie, her easy deception, felt like a physical blow, a punch to the gut. She sounded like the Brenda I knew, the woman I loved, yet she was a stranger. I returned home late that afternoon, early evening, pulling into the driveway, forcing myself to look normal. Brenda met me at the door, a wide smile on her face. She hugged me, her arms around my neck, and then kissed me. Her lips tasted like ash in my mouth. I hugged her back, an automatic response, my body rigid, my mind screaming. Dinner was quiet, the clink of silverware against ceramic plates the only sound. Brenda chattered about her clients, a new listing, how busy the market was. I barely spoke, pushing food around my plate, watching her. I searched her face for a flicker of guilt, a trace of remorse, but found only practiced normalcy. She was a master of performance. Later that night in bed, she turned to me, her hand reaching for my arm. I recoiled internally, a visceral rejection. Long drive, I mumbled, turning onto my side, feigning exhaustion. Wiped out. She sighed, then turned away. The space between us in the bed felt like a chasm. The next morning after breakfast, I asked Brenda to sit down. My voice was steady, unnervingly calm. We need to talk, I said. Her eyes flickered with a brief apprehension, quickly hidden. She sat opposite me at the kitchen table where we'd once planned our future. I took a deep breath. I laid out the evidence piece by piece, like a prosecutor presenting his case. The Maple Street house, the sold sign from 3 weeks ago. Your phone, how you changed the passcodes, how it was always with you. The Find My Phone app, the pings from Westwood, from Wayne Miller's address. The conversation I overheard on the deck. No, he doesn't suspect anything, you said. Soon. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion, like an automated message. Brenda's face drained of color, slowly, surely. She tried to deny, to explain away, her words hollow, desperate. Dale, it's not what you think. Janice called, I told you. My phone, it's just privacy. Wayne, he's just a friend. We were talking about a client. I cut her off, my voice cracking now, the pain finally breaking through the carefully constructed calm. I saw you, Brenda, in our bed, with Wayne, Sunday afternoon. Brenda's carefully constructed composure shattered. Her shoulders slumped, her head bowed. Tears finally flowed, a torrent of them, racking her body. It meant nothing, Dale, her voice thick with snot and remorse. I swear to God it was a mistake, just a terrible, stupid mistake. Brenda's confession reveals half-truths about loneliness and feeling undesirable after infertility, claiming Wayne made her feel seen. Dale listens, his pain and disgust preventing him from fully hearing her words, asking only, how long? She admits the affair began 6 months prior, after their last failed IVF, a time when she felt most broken. Dale, unable to bear her presence, instructs her to pack a bag and leave the house immediately. Brenda desperately pleads, please, Dale, don't do this. We can fix this. Dale responds with chilling finality. There's nothing to fix. You broke it. She departs with her suitcase, promising to call, leaving Dale with a profound sense of emptiness. Dale spends days in a haze, the house feeling vast and alien, yet suffocating with her lingering presence. He calls his parents, explaining the situation in clipped, painful tones. His mother is heartbroken, his father grimly supportive. He contacts Sarah Davies, a no-nonsense divorce lawyer recommended by Frank, to begin proceedings. Brenda floods his phone with ignored texts and calls, filled with desperate apologies and nostalgic pleas. Wayne Miller attempts to call, leaving an awkward, apologetic voicemail that Dale deletes without listening. Dale embarks on the agonizing task of removing Brenda from his life, packing her belongings and boxing photographs. He discovers a hidden box of letters from Wayne confirming the affair's emotional depth and Brenda's investment. The letters detail Brenda's complaints about Dale, their lack of intimacy, and her profound unhappiness. This discovery, more than the physical betrayal, reveals Brenda had systematically dismantled their marriage in her mind for months. Brenda's confession was a messy flood of half-truths punctuated by sobs. She talked about loneliness, about feeling undesirable after all the failed infertility treatments, how Wayne had just made her feel seen again, alive. My ears registered the words, but they didn't penetrate the wall of pain and disgust that had solidified around me. I just stared at her, my voice raw, a rasp against the silence. How long? She wrung her hands, avoiding my gaze. About 6 months after the last IVF cycle, when I felt most broken. 6 months. 6 months of lees, of quiet dinners, of false hugs. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the familiar backyard, now a landscape of indifference. "Pack a bag, Brenda," I said, my voice flat. "I can't be in this house with you right now." She looked up, her face streaked with tears, eyes wide with panic. "Please, Dale, don't do this," she begged, scrambling to her feet. "We can fix this. I know we can. Just give me a chance." I turned, my gaze cold, unwavering. "There's nothing to fix, Brenda," I replied. "You broke it." She stood there for a long moment, then slowly, defeated, she went upstairs. I heard the muffled sounds of her packing, a zipper, a suitcase being moved. She came down 10 minutes later, a small carry-on bag in her hand, her eyes red and swollen. "I'll call you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I just nodded, a silent acknowledgement. She walked out the front door, closing it softly behind her. I watched her go, through the sheer curtains, a solitary figure disappearing down the driveway. I felt nothing but a profound, aching emptiness. The next few days passed in a daze. The house felt vast and alien without her, yet suffocating with her ghost. Her scent still lingered in the bedroom. Her coffee mug was still on the counter. Every object was a reminder, a silent witness to a life that had suddenly ceased to exist. I called my parents. My mother's voice broke as I explained, in clipped, emotionless tones, what had happened. She was heartbroken. My father, grimly supportive, simply said, "We're here for you, son, whatever you need." Frank had given me a name, a divorce lawyer, Sarah Davies, a no-nonsense woman, he'd said, gets things done. I called her office, set up an appointment. The act of making that call, of formalizing the end, was strangely liberating, even as it tightened the knot in my stomach. Brenda sent a barrage of texts, calls, emails, desperate apologies, recounting our memories, trying to evoke nostalgia for a past that was now irrevocably tainted. "Remember that trip to Italy, Dale? I know we can get back to that. Please just talk to me." I ignored them all. My phone remained silent in my pocket, the screen unlit. Wayne Miller even tried to call once, leaving a voicemail that sounded awkward and apologetic. I deleted it without listening. I didn't want to hear anything from him. I started the slow, agonizing process of scrubbing Brenda from my life. I packed her clothes, folded them neatly, placing them into moving boxes. I took down her pictures, the framed smiles, the posed vacations, and put them into boxes too. Each item was a memory, each memory a small cut. It was in the back of her closet, tucked behind a stack of old sweaters, that I found a shoebox. Inside, neatly tied with a red ribbon, were letters. Not from her family, not from old friends. They were from Wayne. My hands trembled as I opened one, then another. They confirmed everything, not just the physical affair, but the depth of Brenda's emotional investment. He wrote about missing her, about their future, about how much she meant to him. Then I found hers. Copies, carbon paper almost, of letters she'd sent to him. In them, she complained about me, about our lack of intimacy, her unhappiness, the way I had changed after the infertility, how she felt invisible. This stung more than the physical betrayal. This was the true unraveling. It wasn't just a mistake, a moment of weakness. She had systematically, methodically, dismantled our marriage in her mind, brick by painstaking brick, over months, maybe even years. The feeling of being seen by Wayne was not a fleeting impulse, but a calculated choice documented in her own hand. It was a long game, and I had been losing without even knowing I was on the field. Life's costly choices unfold in unexpected ways, and if you stick around to the end, You'll see just how deep these choices cut. Brenda moves in with her sister, Mindy, who, despite disappointment in Brenda, attempts to mediate with Dale. Mindy tries to explain Brenda's pain from infertility, but Dale asserts, "Her pain doesn't excuse her choices, Mindy. I was hurting too." News of their separation quickly spreads through their tight-knit community, polarizing friends and neighbors. Dale grapples with intense bursts of anger, the image of Wayne in his home relentlessly replaying. He intentionally visits properties Brenda had listed and Wayne had shown, confirming the professional link that facilitated their affair. Dale learns Wayne was also married with 2 young children, finding grim satisfaction that he isn't the sole victim. Brenda's lawyer proposes mediation, but Dale rejects it, demanding a direct divorce. Brenda sends a heartfelt, handwritten letter expressing deep regret, admitting she lost herself and pleading for reconciliation. Dale reads the letter, feeling a momentary flicker of emotion, but the vivid images of betrayal prompt him to burn it. He resumes going to the gym, using physical exertion to silence his tumultuous thoughts. His work performance declines. Missed sales targets and a fractured focus lead to concern from his regional manager, Mr. Harris. Dale takes a brief leave of absence, citing family matters, desperate for mental space. He examines old photo albums, confronting the devastating contrast between their past vibrant selves and their current reality. He questions whether infertility was the direct cause or merely exposed a deeper, pre-existing marital discontent. Brenda moved in with Mindy, her sister. My cousin. Mindy called me a few days after Brenda left, her voice caught between loyalty and disappointment. She acknowledged Brenda had made a terrible mistake, but then tried to mediate, to make me understand Brenda's pain from the infertility, her feeling of worthlessness. Her pain doesn't excuse her choices, Mindy, I pushed back, my voice tight. I was hurting too. We both were. But I didn't go looking for someone else. Mindy was quiet after that, the unspoken truth hanging in the air. News of the separation rippled quickly through our small community. It always does. Neighbors offered condolences, sometimes with pity in their eyes, sometimes with a knowing glance. Friends started taking sides, the usual unspoken alliances forming. Some called me, offering support. Others went quiet, perhaps unsure what to say. I still had moments of intense anger, hot flashes that would grip me unexpectedly. I'd be driving or making coffee, and the image of Wayne in my home, in my life, would burn behind my eyes, making my hands clench. I started driving around, deliberately seeking out properties Brenda had listed and Wayne had shown. I remembered seeing their names on for sale signs, always together. Brenda Evans and Wayne Miller, your dream home team. It confirmed the professional overlap that had enabled their affair, a perfect cover for their lies. They'd built a business relationship, then shattered 2 families with it. Through a mutual acquaintance in the real estate world, I learned more about Wayne. He was married too. 2 young kids, a girl and a boy. A grim, bitter satisfaction settled in my chest, knowing I wasn't the only one whose life was blowing up. He had his own reckoning coming. Brenda's lawyer contacted Sarah Davies, suggesting mediation. Sarah relayed the message, her voice crisp and professional. I didn't hesitate. No mediation, I told her. Just a straightforward divorce. I want this done. A week later, a long, handwritten letter arrived from Brenda. 10 pages, front and back, in her familiar script. It was full of profound regret, admitting she had lost herself, that she had made a terrible mistake. She talked about us, our life, our dreams, asking for a chance to rebuild. I sat at the kitchen table, reading each word, my heart a dull ache. For a moment, a flicker of something, a memory of the woman I loved, tried to surface, but then the images of betrayal, stark and vivid, flooded back. I walked to the backyard fire pit, crumpled the letter, and set it ablaze. I watched the paper curl and blacken, the words turning to ash, disappearing into the cold Midwestern air. I started going to the gym again, something I hadn't done consistently in years. I pushed myself, lifting weights, running on the treadmill until my muscles screamed and my lungs burned. I needed the physical exhaustion to quiet my mind, to silence the constant replay of memories, the echo of her words. My work suffered. My focus was fractured, my attention scattered. I missed sales targets, my numbers dipping for the first time in years. My regional manager, Mr. Harris, called me into his office. He was a decent man, concerned. "Everything all right, Dale?" he asked, his gaze direct. "You're usually on top of things." I mumbled something about family matters, vague and unconvincing. He nodded slowly. "Take a few days, Dale. Clear your head." I took a brief leave of absence, citing family matters again. I just needed space, needed to breathe without feeling suffocated by the ghost of our life. I started going through old photo albums, sitting on the living room floor surrounded by dusty memories. Pictures of Brenda and me, younger, vibrant, hopeful. Our wedding day, our honeymoon in Italy, smiling at each other, our arms linked. The contrast was devastating. We looked so happy then, so full of promise. Was it all a lie, or had we genuinely lost our way, slowly, imperceptibly, until the cracks became chasms? I wondered if the infertility was the catalyst, the spark that ignited the fire, or merely the crack through which a deeper discontent, a hidden unhappiness, had slowly seeped into our foundation. I still didn't know. The divorce proceedings commence, a detached legal process to divide their shared life. Sarah Davies, Dale's lawyer, operates with efficient directness, prioritizing his best interests. Brenda disputes asset division, especially the house, claiming her real estate expertise boosted its value. Dale's lawyer presents evidence of Brenda's extensive work travel and communication with Wayne, suggesting a diversion from marital focus. The judge largely favors Dale regarding the house, citing Brenda's infidelity as contributing to Dale's emotional distress. Dale decides to sell the dream home they invested so much in, unable to continue living there. He meticulously packs remaining items, gives away furniture, and sells what he can, feeling as though he is burying a past life. While clearing Brenda's office, he discovers old fertility charts, appointment reminders, and a small framed photo of an unfamiliar baby's sonogram. The memory of Brenda's desperate desire for a child intertwines with his anger, producing a complex mix of pity and resentment. He sells the house to a young family with 2 children, witnessing their excitement for a dream he once shared, now passed to strangers. Dale moves into a smaller apartment in a nearby town, seeking a fresh start but feeling profoundly lonely. Brenda's career suffers as news of the affair and divorce impacts her client base. Wayne's marriage also collapses. Dale encounters Brenda by chance at a grocery store. She appears thinner and haunted, and they exchange a brief, wordless glance. He realizes that revenge offers no solace, only another layer of sorrow, with everyone paying a price in different measures. The divorce proceedings began. It was a sterile, legal dance, a meticulous unraveling of a life we'd spent over a decade building. Sarah Davies, my lawyer, was every bit as efficient and direct as Frank had promised. She protected my interests, her movements precise, her language clear. Brenda, through her lawyer, contested the division of assets, particularly the house. She argued that her real estate expertise had been instrumental in its increasing value, that she deserved a larger share. Sarah presented our evidence, the mileage logs, the phone records, the letters, highlighting Brenda's extensive work travel and communication with Wayne during the period in question. Sarah implied a lack of focus on marital assets, a distraction. The judge listened, impassive. In the end, he ruled mostly in my favor regarding the house, citing Brenda's infidelity as a factor in the emotional distress caused to me. It was a small victory, hollow and cold. I decided to sell the house, our dream home, the place we'd poured so much of ourselves into, the kids' kitchen, now a silent monument to a broken future. I couldn't bear to live in it anymore. Every room held a memory, now tainted, every corner a whisper of what had been and what was lost. I spent weeks packing up the remaining items, giving away furniture, selling what I could. It felt like burying a past life, sifting through the remains of a relationship. Each box was a chapter closed, each empty space a testament to a future that would never come. While cleaning out Brenda's small home office space tucked into a drawer, I found a box of old papers, fertility charts, meticulously filled out, tracking cycles and temperatures, appointment reminders for IUIs and IVF, and at the very bottom, a small framed photo, not of our sonogram. A baby, blurry, a tiny form against a dark background. Clearly not ours. It was a generic image, a stock photo of a baby's first sonogram, maybe from a magazine. Brenda must have kept it, a silent prayer. The memory of her desperation for a child mixed with my anger, creating a confusing cocktail of pity and resentment. She had wanted a child so badly, and now she had nothing. We had nothing. I sold the house to a young family with two small children, a boy and a girl. I watched them walk through the empty rooms, their voices full of excitement, their eyes bright with anticipation. The dream I once shared, the life I'd envisioned, now for strangers. It was a strange, bittersweet moment, seeing them begin where we had so dramatically ended. I moved into a smaller apartment in a neighboring town, a clean slate. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal. It was quiet, too quiet. I felt profoundly lonely, the silence a constant hum in my ears. Brenda's career took a hit. Word of the affair and divorce spread, as it always does in small circles. Her client base thinned, her reputation tarnished. Wayne's marriage also imploded, I heard through the grapevine. His wife had packed up the kids and moved back to her parents' home in Michigan. One Tuesday afternoon, I saw Brenda by chance at the grocery store. She was pushing a cart, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked thinner, her eyes haunted, carrying the weight of something I knew intimately. Our gazes met across an aisle of canned vegetables. It was brief, awkward. Neither of us spoke. We just looked, then quickly looked away, turning down separate aisles. I realized then that the revenge wasn't sweet, wasn't satisfying. It was just another layer of sorrow, another cut in an already bleeding wound. The price was paid by everyone, in different measures, and none of it felt worth it. Months later, Dale slowly rebuilds his life, taking on a new work territory and focusing on his future. He cautiously begins dating, forming a connection with Sarah, a kind woman from his new apartment complex. Intimacy in the new relationship is slow and hesitant, as Dale grapples with trust issues and remains constantly on guard. He seeks solace in frequent visits to his parents, finding comfort in their unwavering presence and straightforward affection. Through Mindy, Dale learns that Brenda's attempt to reconcile with Wayne failed, and Wayne has since moved out of state. Brenda remains in the area, working at a smaller real estate agency, striving to reconstruct her life, now alone. Dale reflects on their infertility, recognizing it as a shared chasm that Brenda chose to fill with someone else. He begins therapy, finally addressing the trauma of betrayal and acknowledging his own contribution to their emotional distance. Through this process, he learns to differentiate between aspects of his life he could control and those he could not. Dale accepts that some wounds may never fully heal, instead becoming permanent scars that shape who he is. He discovers a quiet peace in his simpler, new life, letting go of grand dreams for family and a perfect home. He learns to cherish small moments, a tranquil evening, a meaningful conversation, the gentle touch of a new partner. Passing Brenda's former agency, he notes her name is no longer displayed on the sign, a quiet marker of change. The story concludes with Dale observing a Midwestern sunset, feeling the weight of his past, but also a faint emerging hope for the future, born from survival. Months turned into a year. The raw edges of grief and anger slowly dulled, smoothed by time and distance. I slowly rebuilt my life, piece by painstaking piece. My regional manager, Mr. Harris, offered me a new territory, further west, a chance for a fresh start. I took it, pouring my energy into work, focusing on the future instead of clinging to the past. The road became my companion again, the calls and targets, a structure to my days. I started dating, cautiously. I met Sarah at the apartment complex, a kind woman with an easy laugh who worked as a librarian. Our conversations were slow, hesitant, built on shared quiet moments in the laundry room or at the mailbox. The intimacy was slow too, haunted by past wounds. I struggled with trust, constantly on guard. Every glance, every late text, a potential trigger. Sarah was patient, understanding. She just waited, letting me find my way at my own pace. I visited my parents more often. Their house, always a place of comfort, became a sanctuary. Their steady presence, their uncomplicated love, was a balm. My mother would bake my favorite pie. My father would sit with me on the porch, talking about anything but the divorce, yet always present. Through Mindy, I learned more about Brenda. She tried to make it work with Wayne, apparently. But it didn't last. Wayne, now divorced, had packed up and moved out of state, leaving his own wreckage behind. Brenda was still in the area, working at a smaller agency downtown, trying to piece her life back together. She was alone, Mindy said, her voice tinged with a complex mix of sympathy and judgment. I reflected on the infertility often. I saw now that it hadn't just created a void. It had created a chasm between us. And when that chasm formed, Brenda chose to fill it with someone else, not with me. It wasn't just a mistake, as she'd claimed. It was a choice made over time, driven by her own pain and a need I hadn't been able to meet. I finally started therapy, something Frank had suggested a year ago. It was hard peeling back the layers of trauma, the betrayal, confronting not just her actions, but my own part in the emotional distance that had grown between us. The long silences, the quiet acceptance of a fading intimacy, the fear of confronting the deeper issues. I learned to distinguish between what I could control and what I couldn't, to let go of the burden of trying to fix everything or blame myself for everything. I accepted that some wounds don't fully heal. They just become scars, a permanent part of who you are, a map of where you've been, but no longer bleeding. They just exist. I found a quiet peace in my new, simpler life. The big dreams of a sprawling family, of the perfect suburban home, were gone, replaced by something smaller, more manageable. I learned to appreciate the small moments, a quiet evening reading a book, a good conversation with Sarah over coffee, the gentle, reassuring touch of her hand. These were the true anchors now. One afternoon, I drove past Brenda's old agency building. The sign, once proudly displaying her name, was gone. Just a blank space where her identity used to be. It was a quiet end, a final erasure. The sun was setting, painting the Midwestern sky in shades of orange and purple, the kind of deep, clear colors you only see out here. I stood on my small apartment balcony, watching it sink below the horizon, feeling the cool evening air on my face. The weight of the past was still there, a familiar ache, but it no longer crushed me. There was a faint, new glimmer of hope for a future, not the one I'd planned, but one forged from the quiet strength of survival, of picking up the pieces and finding a way to live again. This was enough.